what are some things to consider when it comes to working out as it relates to longevity? And what are some of the best workout routines in your opinion?
Oh man, I love that question. I used to be a lot more masochistic. I think maybe part of it was identity, and we could get into this. You could probably get pretty esoteric, but I think that a lot of times people who are off doing like massive numbers of Spartan races and Ironman triathlons and marathons and open water swim competitions and CrossFit competitions, all the type of stuff that I was doing, they're typically either looking for their identity to a certain extent. Sometimes I think that if we had woven into society something like more remarkable ceremonial rites of passage for our youth, we might, find less 20-year-olds trying to do, triathlons and bodybuilding and whatnot to prove themselves. And then I also think that there is a little bit of a healthy escapism, especially with some of the chronic repetitive motion type of sports. You tend to see a lot of folks who are like former alcoholics or drug abusers will be drawn to those type of events because they can kind of trigger a lot of those same dopaminergic pathways, but obviously with a little less potential for damage or death or self harm. Now that being said, there's definitely not a risk free aspect of hard exercise. There's a researcher named James O'Keefe, and he's one of the first physicians and researchers. Because I forget if he's a PhD or an MD. It's not important, but he found that there was a law of diminishing returns with exercise when it comes to cardiovascular risk and what's called arterial stiffness. And it appears that once you exceed about 180 minutes, which is about 3 hours of moderate to hard exercise, we're talking something beyond like playing pickleball and walking or whatever. We're talking like, hard bike rides, hard swims, hard runs, CrossFit sessions, weight training sessions, high intensity interval training. Once you exceed about 3 hours, there's actually a pretty significant law of diminishing returns in terms of arterial stiffness and potential damage to the heart, particularly related to plaque buildup or calcium buildup in the heart. People wonder, well, what do you do then? If you're not supposed to do all the hard exercise, but you are supposed to exercise, obviously. Um, I don't know if we've talked about this before, Tim, but my background is exercise physiology. So University of Idaho, my degree was in exercise physiology and biomechanics with an emphasis in human nutrition and pharmacology. And the reason that's important is because a physiologist kind of looks at the different metabolic pathways in the human body. And in the same way that a strength and conditioning coach might say, okay, well, I'm looking at the game of football and here are the needs, right? Strength, power, a certain amount of explosiveness over a distance of anywhere from, 10 to 40 yards, some type of shoulder stability. And then depending on the position, maybe good shoulder rotation for a quarterback or, good horizontal extension for a linebacker, et cetera. When a physiologist looks at the human body, particularly from a longevity standpoint, I step back and say, what are the different metabolic pathways that one would need to maintain a certain amount of proficiency or optimization in order to function well late into life? And once you step back and look at things that way, it's pretty easy to actually decide what you're going to prioritize for any given week or month in an exercise program. So I would chunk it into a few categories. The first would be strength. Like we know that grip strength, the amount of functional muscle, staving off sarcopenia or the loss of muscle with age, and general functional muscle fiber percentage is associated with decreased all-cause risk of mortality, even more so than like VO2 max or cardiovascular fitness, even though that's important. And I think the reason for that is because it staves off a lot of the frailty that occurs with age. A lot of older people lose their fitness because of injuries, not because they quit going to the gym, but they get injured stepping off a curb, or they get injured, playing soccer, or they get injured, swinging the golf club, and they miss a few days and then a few weeks and a few months of working out, and that accumulates as you age. And a properly structured strength training program is, I think, the best way to keep that at bay. Now, as you alluded to, I used to do a lot of competitive sports. I used to be very into like explosive type of weight training, CrossFit type of exercises, snatches and cleans and jerks, and even like a bodybuilding style approach with very high reps and a lot of sets. I'm now convinced that the very, very best way to maintain strength and muscle long into old age with a very low risk of injury is not that style of training, even though that style of training is good if you're going to be playing sports, and every once in a while you may want to throw in some kettlebell swings or clap push-ups or box jumps or those type of things. But because they have a high risk of injury, which again, if you get injured and you've missed a few days and that accumulates as you age, that can be problematic. Super slow training, very slow controlled lifting done 2 to 3 times per week, I think is one of the best ways to stay strong and maintain muscle with age. And that's like probably about 80 to 90% of what I do now for strength training. What I mean by that is I'll go to the gym, whether it's my home gym or a health club or whatever, and it's one single set to failure for each exercise. So super slow chest press or push up, super slow deadlift, super slow pull down or pull up, super slow overhead press, super slow row, and super slow squat. That would be an example of like a cluster of
just
multi-joint
just one set
exercises that I do.
You're saying just one set?
Just one set. Yeah, I'll warm up on like an Airdyne bike or an elliptical trainer or whatever, but one set to failure, and that's important. So we're talking like, people might be watching the video, like the cadence of a chest press might be 1, 2, 3, and you're just pushing for almost like 20 seconds out to an extended position, and then you come back very, 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 very slow. And there's a emergency room physician who wrote a book called Body by Science, which is where I first discovered this concept. His name is Dr. Doug McGuff, and he gets into a lot of the science of it in his book. But because you're moving the muscle very slow, you're recruiting both fast twitch and slow twitch muscle fibers. You're building up a lot of blood flow resistance in the peripheral muscles, which has a cardiovascular training effect. And you can get very strong and maintain muscle. And this is important for busy guys like us as a time hack in a very short period of time. So you can do super slow full body lifting for about 20 to 30 minutes, 2 or 3 times a week. And that would satisfy a lot of your strength training.
So
that being said,
let me ask you a couple questions.
We'll stay physically active, but go ahead.
So it's one set, but what is the amount of weight relative to what you would normally do? And is it just one rep, or is it as many reps as you can do until you get to failure?
Great question. Subtle nuance. Time under tension. Usually you need about 2 minutes of time under tension for the muscle. So unless you were lifting a weight that took you like 60 seconds to go up and 60 seconds to go down, which is just like mentally hard to do. And for most people, it's going to be somewhere in the range of 5 to 8 repetitions for one single set to failure, moving the weight anywhere from 10 to 30 seconds up and 10 to 30 seconds down. So that's kind of the overview of that training. And then in people who still want some like the explosive quick muscle, like I focus on that stuff when I'm not in the gym. Like I keep a kettlebell on the floor of my office, and I'll do kettlebell swings every once in a while when I step over that, or I'll drop and do some push-ups, multiple intervals throughout the day, do some air squats, occasionally go to the mailbox and then run back. So I don't do a lot of like the explosive fast type of stuff or bodybuilding stuff at the gym. I'm just like super duper slow, heavy strength training. And so that would kind of check the box of strength or muscle. And I think it would be top of the totem pole, would be single set resistance training to failure at a super slow pace.